Come on in, welcome to Idled Out, where we talk all things Survivor. My name is Luke, and today we're counting down the players who attended the most tribal councils in a single season. Tribal Council is generally not a place you want to be, and yet these Survivor players kept going back to it over and over and over again. Like moths to a flame, they apparently couldn't get enough of it. You have to be a particular kind of unlucky to see Tribal Council a record-setting amount of times. You not only have to be on the worst tribe at the start, but continue to be throughout whatever tribe swaps come your way. At a certain point, you've got to wonder if you're the problem on your tribe. But it's not enough to just lose a lot at the start. You also then have to be good enough to make the end of the game. Then there are the things that are outside of your control. You'll have to be on a season with a large cast, and probably survive a re-entry mechanic like Edge of Extinction or Redemption Island. It's all easier said than done, and it wasn't even really that easy to say. For the purposes of this video, I will be counting Final Tribal Council as a tribal council. I mean, it's right there in the name. And we'll be talking about US Survivor only, otherwise we'd see a lot of Australian Survivor players on this list. Who went to the most tribal councils in a single season, and how did they get so lucky? Let's find out. All that said, let's dig into the Survivor players who attended the most tribal councils in a single season. At number 5 is, well, okay, it's a 6-way tie for second, but there is a way to rank these players in a way that makes sense. So at number 5 are Rick and Lauren in Survivor Edge of Extinction, who attended 15 tribal councils apiece, the only 2 players here to not reach Final Tribal Council, and the only 2 to be voted out, or in Rick's case, be voted out twice. Rick and Lauren both started on the Manu tribe, a horribly cursed tribe that stumbled out of the gate and lost the first 3 tribal immunity challenges, forced to vote out Reem, Keith, and one other player. Their rival tribe, Kama, was pretty stacked physically, but Manu was also pretty train wrecky. The returning players on this tribe were targeting one another but had a shaky ceasefire. Wendy was borderline intentionally sabotaging the tribe. The muscle on this tribe turned out to be made out of paper mache, and tribe mom Reem is the worst TV mother since Livia Soprano. I mean, she didn't try to have Chris whacked, but she came pretty close.
You got the biggest mouth in the whole country.
Luckily for Manu, an episode 4 tribe swap reshuffles the deck, and the majority of 5 on Manu are sent to a new tribe without their easy next boot Wendy or any Kama players. And if you think that having this tribe distilled down to its essence would get their affairs in order, you'd be wrong. The Lesu 5 really doubled down on giving up. I mean, they didn't even bother making a shelter. They lose immunity yet again in episode 4 and vote off Rick. But he barrels back into the game at the merge, bursting through the wall like some sort of giant, red, frenetic, wall-smashing corporate mascot. Possibly the Noid. Oh yeah! Rick and Lauren both made the endgame of Edge of Extinction in very different ways. Rick was chronically out of the loop, but performed solidly in challenges and was preternaturally good at finding idols, which allowed him to charismatically showboat at Tribal Council and pump himself up in front of the jury. Lauren worked with Kelly and Wardog to exploit cracks in the larger Kama 6, but also to try and take out Rick and David, instead of just trying to stick together as a group of underdogs. The Vote Out Rick movement is initially a pretty bad strategy, but she toots that horn long enough that it eventually circles back around to being a pretty good idea. Once Wardog nuked his and Kelly's games for literally no reason, Lauren really emerged from Kelly's shadow as the big anti-Rick voice in the game. Either one of them could have earned the tribal of most tribals attended in a single season if they made that final tribal council, but Lauren was idled out at Final 5 and Rick lost firemaking at Final 4, leaving us with the final 3 of Gavin, Julie, and one other player. At number 4 are Spencer in Survivor Cambodia and Ken in Survivor Millennials vs. Gen X, who both attended 15 tribal councils and then got shut out at Final Tribal Council. Spencer and Ken, two pre-merge underdogs who Charlie Browned their way through the early part of the game, then stayed with their obvious jury threat allies until it was way too late. However, their approach to the early game could not be more different. 33-year-old single dad, alleged Gen Xer, professional handsome man, and possible monarch Ken played really slow and steady out of the gate. He was way outside of the power structure on the original Gen X tribe due to his humble, soft-spoken introversion. The juxtaposition of a dude who looks like this, literally named Ken, being a pretty shy and reserved dude must have been an irresistible pickup for casting. He is extremely rootable in the early part of the season. I don't think his game was setting the world on fire or anything, but his unlikely alliance with David is very wholesome, and he's a fun underdog. Spencer, on the other hand, came out of the gate in Cambodia way too fast. While his new school alliance was successful the first round in getting out Vetus, he comes within an inch of being the second boot of the season because he and Shirin are gaming way too hard. If they stuck with these original tribes for more than 2 rounds, Spencer is very likely next to go. But he's saved by a swap that sends him and Wigglesworth to Bion, where he learns to be a real boy.
These skills are terrible.
I'm someone who's played pretty logically in the past, but I've failed when it comes to understanding emotions of people, and that's been a huge flaw. And so I'm trying something new on this tribe. I'm trying to have feelings.
Oh, they have self-reflection now. You want Skynet? This is how you get Skynet. Spencer 9000 here really embodies the second chance theme best for me, despite his series of late game blunders. He recognized the qualities that lost him the game before, his arrogance and lack of social connections, and made an earnest effort to recalibrate his game after getting spared at the second to KO vote. This is the new and improved Spencer 2.0, now with the ability to love. Including self-love. Okay, who programmed him to do that? Due to some highly questionable late-game decisions from both of them, Ken and Spencer were both drawing dead by the end of the game, unlikely to win any final tribal combination. But their biggest mistakes, similarly, were not taking out their closest ally / giant, obvious, biggest threat until way too late. Spencer's new treat people like people approach seemingly backfires at the end, as he waits way too long to vote off Jeremy. Although in Spencer's defense, he couldn't have known that Jeremy was gonna bust out the "my wife's pregnant" card at Final Tribal. Ken was in an even tougher spot, arguably, simultaneously berated at Final Tribal for waiting too long to eliminate David, but also for betraying him at Final Four. Not sure what you people want. Who knows if they make all these late game mistakes if they aren't attending almost every tribal council in the entire season though. The mental fatigue of attending 14 prior tribal councils certainly did not help them at the final one. I mean, maybe a less mentally and physically drained Spencer has the idea to tell the jury that his girlfriend's also pregnant, and they're having twins. At number 3 are Natalie, Russell, and Mick, who also attended 15 tribal councils in Survivor Samoa, literally every tribal council this season, except for one. Just by the nature of this list, we're going to see a lot of disastrous tribes, but few are more disastrous from a performance point of view than Foa. They didn't have a good start to the game. They lost the first immunity challenge and vote out Marisa, a woman who had no business being the first person voted out of Survivor, other than her skepticism that Russell is the greatest player of all time. I mean, I'd say you're like top 25, top 30, but greatest ever? I've known you for 2 days.
First person voted out of Survivor Samoa, Marisa.
Things go from bad to worse for Foa at the next immunity challenge. 5 seconds after Jeff lectures everyone on not taking cheap shots, Ben takes a major cheap shot and gets ejected from the challenge. Then Mean Motor Scooter Mike runs out of gas and is medically evacuated from the game. Despite losing Mike, Foa still has to go to Tribal Council, meaning by the end of day 6, they're down 3 people. It's interesting to watch an increasingly frustrated Foa fail to understand why they're chronically losing. I got news for ya. The call is coming from inside the house. It's impossible to quantify exactly how much Russell's sabotage of Foa contributed to their losing challenge record, but it certainly didn't help them. One by one, Foa was voted out until only 4 remained. It's kind of surprising to me that these 4 were the 4 who survived the pre-merge Foa slaughter, only because I don't think any of the 4 of them have much in particular in common. I never really saw them as a cohesive unit pre-merge. Foa enters the merge down 8-4, and that'll unify anyone. Each member of Foa expertly plays their role here to overthrow Galoo. Natalie cleverly worms her way in with several of the women, planting the seeds of an Eric boot in the ears of Laura that allowed Foa the inch they needed to take a mile. Russell found and successfully played idols, further increasing their lead. And Jason and Mick sure were there too. Through a series of increasingly bad decisions by various members of Galoo, the Foa 4 in the ultimate Cinderella story whittle Galoo down to 1, Brett, the most anticlimactic final boss ever outside of that stupid human Reaper in Mass Effect 2. Brett wins the final 5 immunity challenge, and Foa has to vote out one of their own, which ends up being Jason. But Brett loses the next immunity challenge and is obviously voted out, sending these 3 Foas to the final tribal council together. It's a super impressive feat to attend 15 tribal councils, enter the merge majorly down in numbers, and to get basically every member of Galoo to flip against their own self-interest at least once. And all this despite Mick's leadership. Good for them.
Feckless.
Feckless.
At number 2 is Denise in Survivor Philippines, who attended 15 tribal councils, the first and so far only player to ever attend every single tribal council in their season, make the end, and then win. This is a feat so improbable it took 25 seasons for it to happen, and which I highly doubt will ever happen again. The stars really did have to align for Denise on this one, although I'm sure she would have preferred to win without attending every tribal council. First, she had to survive Matt Singh. This is a tribe notorious in Survivor lore, and for good reason. This tribe of 6 lost the first 4 challenges, putting the only survivors of this tribe, Denise and Malcolm, through their own little mini Survivor marathon right out of the gate. One by one, their tribe went out the door. Being on the constantly losing Buffoon tribe has to be one of the single most frustrating and draining Survivor experiences ever. You're basically getting to experience the end game of Survivor, but at the beginning of the game. Then you get to the merge and you realize you still have 2/3 of the game to go. But few have navigated tribe implosions better than the dynamic duo of Denise and Malcolm, who had each other's backs and outlasted the big brains on Matt Singh every step of the way. And let me tell you, the brains were big.
I'm playing chess the best way I know how, and hopefully, I'm gonna king me.
If I could change one thing about this tribe,
that we could have cookies.
Wow, how'd they outfox this crew? Once Matt Singh is down to 2, Malcolm and Denise are split up. Malcolm is sent to Tandang and Denise to Calabao. Luckily for Denise, there are 2 competing factions on this tribe, a men's alliance led by Jeff and a women's alliance led by Katie. Denise is a pretty obvious first-round draft pickup for this woman's alliance, then Dana quits. So Denise goes with the numbers and joins up with the men instead to send Katie and Dawson down the creek. Denise and Malcolm hook back up at the merge, and the rest is Survivor history. They exploit major cracks in Tandang between RC and Pete and Abby, the rivalry between Jeff and Penner, and ultimately land in a 4-person alliance that ensured whichever one of them was in the final 3 with Lisa and Scoopin was leaving the Philippines a millionaire. The only thing standing between Denise and $1 million is challenge beast Malcolm, who enters the final immunity challenge off a 2 immunity hot streak and with an advantage in this very challenge. It'll take a Herculean effort to beat Malcolm. Oh, never mind. Surviving every single tribal council is an impressive feat on its own. Add winning onto that, and this is one of the most wildly impressive feats in Survivor history, in my opinion, and one unlikely to ever be seen again. Not even Stephanie LaGrossa attended every single pre-merge tribal council. In Survivor, narratives are everything, and even if Denise was a horrible player, which she's not, the narrative that she survived every tribal in the game would be an appealing one to almost any juror. That's why the second Stephanie hit the Karor Beach, Tom and Ian were like, yeah, she's gotta go. But thankfully, Mike Scoopin is no Tom Westman. For one, Tom fights fires, Scoopin takes naps in them. Mike, we've talked about this. Fires are hot. The Survivor player who survived the most tribal councils in a single season is Michelle in Survivor Winners at War, who attended 16 tribal councils, which is all but 4 of that season's 20 tribal councils, including Final Tribal. You might say that Michelle was making up for lost time in Winners at War. In Survivor Korong, thanks to being on winning tribes the entire pre-merge and because of several medevacs, Michelle only attended 6 tribal councils on her winning season, which was, up until that point, by far the least amount of tribal councils attended by a winner. To put it in context, that 6 tribal council record for a winner was tied by a guy who got voted out third, a man who was by far the second best third boot to make Final Tribal Council. I personally thought Michelle played a great game in Korong, but a lot of Survivor fans thought her road to the end wasn't really worthy of the win. Michelle clearly felt like she had something to prove in Winners at War, and she was successful. While Michelle was pretty much never in control during Winners at War, she played an impressive from the bottom game that kept her afloat through a very chaotic season. I don't always think it's a super impressive feat to make Final Tribal Council. There are definitely players who passively play for second or third, like, look at these two.
What the hell with you?
But in Michelle's case, her appearance at Final Tribal is very much earned. She's on the outs from the jump, but on both Original Sele and Swapped Sele, she's able to successfully worm her way back into a little bit of power. Not so at the post-merge, where she loses her closest ally and all her social capital, all in a single vote. She managed to vote correctly only during a few rounds, but always as the last to know, she never had any sort of leverage. Still, she won a few clutch immunities and constantly scraped by when the majority alliance was actively against her, so in my book, that's pretty impressive. Personally, I think Michelle deserved second place, and I think many of the jury did too. But hey, I wasn't there and Survivor doesn't have ranked choice voting. It seems unlikely to me that Michelle's 16 Tribal Council record will ever be broken. Winners at War had 20 players, no quits or medevacs, plus 2 extra Tribal Councils thanks to battlebacks. The format of Survivor 41 and 42 only has 16 Tribal Councils in total, and the double elimination in the premiere makes it literally impossible for someone to even tie Michelle, even if they do pull a Denise. Of course, with Survivor, anything's possible. Maybe they'll have a Survivor record nullifier in Season 43. Got nothing else for ya. To help me get more views than tribals attended by these players, like and subscribe and I'll get you more Survivor content just like this. Until next time, don't get idled out.